Before we begin the video, if you haven't yet, come on down and join my Discord server. Link is down in the description. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel for one of our final Season 12 videos. As I normally do, today I will be ranking all 16 episodes of Ninjago Season 12. Last time around we had 30 episodes, which was quite a lot. And this time we have 16, but even that is a lot too, so I'll be keeping my thoughts relatively short. So I'd say around 20 seconds for each episode, and if you want more detailed explanations, feel free to check out my reviews. Having said that, let's begin. By far, the worst episode of this season would have to be Am Okino. I just feel this episode is very boring and there isn't really much of a point to it. The problem is that these side characters are mostly very annoying and I really don't care about them, so their death doesn't really leave an impact. The good thing was the introduction of Okino, who I think is a mostly well done character. But besides that, there isn't really much I like about this episode. It just feels like a lot of good ideas were not really executed well, while other aspects of this episode feel dumbed down. Ninjago Confidential is a step above, but I still feel this episode is very weird. I like the grayscale of this episode, but I feel the constant detective narration is very out of place and very forced. And yeah, it doesn't really feel natural for Zane and Pixel. And I gotta say, I'm kinda disappointed with the way Zane was handled in this season. Despite all of that though, there were some good parts of this episode, like seeing Dareth and the grayscale as I said, but I feel there were a lot of concepts that just weren't really executed well in this episode. We're making the jump from bad to good episodes, and it all starts with the Cliffs of Hysteria. This was a decent episode in my opinion, but it's basically just forced action. The main thing going on in this episode is action, action, and more action. Although they do keep it interesting by adding in some plot elements like the explanation of Unagami's plan. And I think it was good that that was added in, because otherwise this episode would be a lot lower in the rankings. But all in all, this episode is decent, not wonderful, but definitely not bad either. Our next entry on the list is episode 9, one step forward, two steps back. Looking back on it, while I feel this episode is still good, I think I praised it a bit too much. I guess the only issue is that episode 9 feels a bit boring at times, but that's about all. This episode has a unique idea, and I think it mostly works. As a result, we get to see some pretty cute Jay and Neo moments, and I think this episode is definitely really fun. But the reason why this episode isn't higher up on the list is mainly because other episodes are a lot more interesting. Dyer Island is another good one, but with one big issue, and that is a very forgettable and forced action scene. Again, Dyer Island has a really forced fight against his security system, which I just honestly feel didn't really need to happen. The rest of the episode I quite liked though. The interrogation of the mechanic was cool, albeit unnecessary. I feel the main attraction of this episode was kinda getting to see a bit of Dyer, and hinting at his backstory. And then you have Bob the Intern, who is a legendary Ninjago character. Level 13 is a really good episode in my opinion, and it featured the return of Cyrus Borg. This is his first appearance since Season 10, and his first speaking role since way back in Hands of Time. Let's face it, a technology-themed season just wouldn't feel right without Borg. Other returning characters include Captain Soto, Ultraviolet, and Fugitive. The action was good, and I like the rebooted vibes I was getting from this episode, with Borg Tower being invaded for pretty much the first time since Season 3. Superstar Rockin Jay is just an awesome episode, and there's so much to love about it. First off, I just love the League of Jays, and honestly, who doesn't? This episode introduced Prime Empire perfectly, and gets us well acquainted to the rules, and the Red Visors, and Scott too. The 11-minute format is excellent for these expository episodes, and as opposed to past seasons, they don't feel slow or boring. The only issue I have is Kai acting like an idiot and being dumb, but other than that, very exciting episode. Next up, we have episode 10, Racer 7, and I really enjoyed this one. I feel like Racer 7 was introduced really well. As I've said, I really love this idea of her being programmed to lose, and I think it's a very compelling story. The dialogue works really well, and when I say that I love the NPCs in this season, it is largely because of how this episode shapes Racer 7. However, I wish Nia was the focus for this episode instead of Lloyd, because Nia in the past has had to prove herself like Racer 7, and that would have been a better connection. The Prodigal Father is the typical backstory episode of the season, and I think it was executed really well. The backstory sequence is very enjoyable, and I think it's definitely fun to watch, and I liked learning more about Dyer and Unagami. On the other side, we get to see more of the mechanic and Zane, and Wu also plays a role in this episode, which I thought was a good move. What I don't like about this episode is Zane still feels very bland, and I'm just so sick of the whole Zane abuse thing. Regardless of that though, the rest of the episode is still very well written. In my opinion, the Speedway 5-Billion was one of the most anticipated events of the season, and it didn't disappoint. The race works very well with the 11-minute format, and this is something we haven't seen in Ninjago, a race, since Season 8, and the last time before that was Season 2. Episode 11 has a frantic tone, kicking off with Scott's death, and I feel like that was a great contrast to Episodes 9 and 10 being more casual. Racer 7 winning is also a decent twist, and I really would not have seen that coming before Episode 10. Nice, in 6th place, we have episode 6. Only time that'll be happening today, but all jokes aside, I like this one. This one sets up Terra Karana nicely, and I like the animation too. We get some good night scenes, and also some nice looking environments. It also has some cool fight scenes like a brief rat ambush, and also a red visor ambush that I liked as well. We also get a nice Okino moment with him finding out that Prime Empire isn't real. And yes, this episode does have the rats, but I kind of feel like they're just there. You know, they don't really impact the season too much. Putting the premiere in top 5 may be an unpopular opinion, but I thought this was a very strong start to the season. Despite a stupidly long episode title, the rest of the episode is very good, and sets up stuff like the mechanic and the Prime Empire motherboard very well. Episode 1 does exactly what a premiere should do. It got me hooked in the story and established its key components. It also kept it interesting with good humor too, like Zane saying old games are unchallenging, and Cole referencing Wu's ninja movies. I think this episode is definitely underrated, and I still quite like it. Episode 8 is where the season really gets interesting, and before this, we had only heard Unagami's voice. In this episode, we actually get to see him. And man, this scene rocks. I love the voice acting, the animation, the dialogue. This still remains one of my favorite scenes of the season. The maze was also a really interesting environment, and we got some really good action. I love the fight against the Red Dragon, although I feel it was resolved too easily and way too conveniently. Ultimately though, I think this episode also served as a good conclusion to Okino's arc. The season finale, Game Over, is probably the most enjoyable episode, but definitely suffers from a few technical aspects that I can't ignore. For one, the episode is very rushed, and also it fails to tie up a few key loose ends. The rest of the episode knocks it out of the park though, delivering one of the best Ninjago action scenes ever, and also my personal favorite scene from DHX's Ninjago. That of course would be Dyer's confrontation with Unagami, which I feel was just a very touching scene. Game Over concludes the season with some of the best stuff we've seen from post-Oni trilogy Ninjago. The penultimate episode, Temple of Madness, will take the runner-up spot on this list, and this was a really exciting episode. The episode had some nice Jay and Neo moments that I definitely was fond of, and I think this episode was definitely pretty good for Jay. While I personally don't really care too much about the sushimi stuff, seeing Unagami and him fighting Jay and all that stuff towards the end was really amazing. Episode 15 really felt like the endgame. Along with episode 14, it did a great job of setting the finale up and definitely had me hyped for it. However, there is one better episode. And that episode is episode 12, Stop, Drop, and Side Scroll, which is my favorite episode of season 12. Harumi was executed really nicely in this season, and they definitely could have made her a lot worse. So I think the Lloyd and Harumi fight, while overrated, is still really good. The rest of the action in this episode is really unique. It's not just a typical red visor fight, and I love the return of air jutsu. Also, Jay's Fortnite dance is shockingly not actually bad. I just really like this episode, and I think it succeeds in both action and emotion. But yeah, that's about all for my ranking of the Ninjago Season 12 Prime Empire episodes. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with anyone and everyone you know. Be sure to post your full ranking of the episodes down below, as well as an explanation of your favorite one, and I'll see you next time.